It might not look like it at this stage, but I think the PowerMod standalone ECU is one of the easiest ECUs to install. RPMs are working. What?
A few moments later.
It's only worth it if you work for it. It's only worth it if you work for it. I won't stop till they hear me now. I won't stop till I wear the crown.
Before we jump into all of this, just a reminder of the Falcon Friday videos. I just got the AU Falcon up and driving again after spending a month building these wheel spacers. If you want to go check that video out now, you can click on the join button and help support the channel by becoming a member. In last week Sunday's video, I also said that if you can get that video to 100 likes, I will post a video of making the side exit exhaust. Welcome back to Falcon Friday. Didn't quite hit that goal, but great effort guys, thank you so much for all the likes. So I posted it anyway, so you can check it out over here after this video. Full disclaimer, please take everything in those videos with a grain of salt and just enjoy the sketchiness that is Falcon Friday. Now to get into the ECU. So the PowerMod's DFI standalone ECU is made to work on a few different applications. So what I want to do first is sort out the wiring. So I'm gonna take these apart, then just cut all the wires that we won't be using. All that we're gonna need is the 2 wires for the crank sensor, a couple of wires for the 6 injectors and the 3 coils, then just a vacuum line for the map sensor that's built into the PowerMod's ECU, and it's as easy as that. So before I just had the ECU over in the glove box, but as we know, I stole that for the Ford. But now that both cars have their own ECU, I want to hide this one a bit better. So I was thinking somewhere in the footwell over there, but I'll just show you guys when I get to that. And then in the glove box, we're going to have the oil pressure gauge. I still need to get that hooked up, but it's not such a big deal. And then as well as the boost gauge. And I think that'll just tie in everything for the whole sleeper look now that we have those gauges working. I'm still not fully convinced that the cluster will actually work, but in theory it should. But for now that we have the wires all figured out that we need, we can start pulling them through the firewall and into the engine bay and take things from there. Before we start pulling any wires through the firewall, I do want to show you guys a few tips and tricks. These are the wires I managed to get rid of, so we won't be needing them. Still a decent amount of wires, but a lot more manageable. Your 14-pin plug and then your 24-pin plug. But on the 14-pin plug, it comes with a little temperature sensor, so the trick is to cut the wires going to that. It has a brown wire that's just the earth, and then pin 14 that says air temperature. Then you get that onto pin 7, which is the water temperature, so that you can adjust the cold start. And by the way, you can get the user manual on their website. It's just easier when you have it printed out, and then you can pin everything out from there. Like I said, the ECU is quite universal, so you have your output according to modes. So I know I'm going to be running a 60-2 M-coiled phase sequential injectors with multi-coils. The crank trigger is a 60-2. That signal we'll be getting from the stock flywheel that's in the stock gearbox, and everything works perfect. And what's cool about that is it's actually at the optimum position as well. So that's pretty cool and makes it much easier. Now what I mean by that is in the user manual it states that the usable range is 9 to 24 teeth, and on the stock gearbox the crank sensor location is exactly at 11 teeth before the sensor. So I just have the car in the air. I already got the crank sensor hooked up, so let's go down there and then I'll show you the 2 crank sensors and how I managed to wire them up. Okay, so under the car, it's just a bit difficult to film down here, but bear with me. So this little purple wire is for the starter so that we can start the car with the key, and that works. We have the crank sensor that we'll be using for the power mods. It's quite difficult to get to, but I got it in there. And when you follow the sleeving over here, we have another crank sensor. So this crank sensor we'll be using for the stock cluster. So it doesn't really matter how many teeth it is before the sensor and all that. We just need it to pick up any type of signal. I got the wires all tidied up in some sleeving, and then we have the crank sensor for the power mods wire going in over here, and then I'll show you where that is inside the car. Moving on into the car, so I forgot to mention it has that plate that goes in the footwell. So what I did was get the ECU mounted, come on, mounted onto it over there. Now my fingers are stuck. Fuck. And then I went ahead and got the 14-pin plug over there and started to run the wires. So these two wires are for the water temperature sensor, so that we can adjust the cold starts, and that will control the radiator fans as well. And then we have this gray wire that's for the crank sensor or the RPM sensor, and that's where it goes through and comes out next to the gearbox. And then the only other thing we're going to be using is this little orange wire and the green wire, and that'll be for the launch control or the flat foot shifting. I got that pulled through to the other side because this time I want to get a switch on the clutch and not have it on a button anymore. Having that with a switch on the clutch would just make it easier to launch the car, and also we want to try to get the flat foot shifting to work. So if you drive the car hard and you shift gears, I'm hoping that we'll get a pop. Because with the no lift shift, it retards the timing as soon as you press the button, everything like that, but we'll get to that later on. But I am excited about that. Another thing I did was get the oil pressure gauge and the boost gauge into the glove box with this little bracket I made, but I had two problems with that. Number one, if you're sitting in the driver's seat, you couldn't really see the boost gauge, and then number two, it didn't look good. So what I did is got the two gauges in over here, and I think that looks so cool. I do need a new shifter, but if you want to go full sleeper mode, you can still close it or open it to check things out. So now that we have that figured out, I can get them both connected up. I do have the cluster taken apart again because that fuel gauge was stuffing around, so I want to wait until I get the car on again on some power and then switch it on to see where the fuel level is at. Just get it where it needs to be when it's turned on while it's open. Then we should be good over there. But for now, let's get started on the 24-pin plug. That's the power, the injectors, everything like that, and see if we can get this done. Alright, so now I have all the wires pulled through the firewall. Even got some cool mounting ports for the two relays. So one is going to be for the ECU to turn that on and off, and the other one is going to be for the radiator fan. It's going to look a lot better once I get everything in sleeving, but for now let's move on to the front of the car and start connecting the wires. So these 4 wires are for the coils, wires for the injectors. Now something to keep in mind is just to connect them according to their phases. So we have phase 1, 2 and 3, and when you look over on this cover, phase 1 is going to be cylinder 1 and 6, phase 2 is 2 and 5, and phase 3 is 3 and 4. So you just need to make sure that you connect your injectors with your coils in that sequence. Cylinder 1 and 6 is going to be phase 1, 2 and 5 is phase 2, and then 3 and 4 is phase 3. So I have the 6 injector plugs with the 3 coil plugs, and let's get everything wired up. I'm so happy with how the wiring is coming out, especially up front. I'm still busy on the inside, and then I just got the battery in there, have the ECU, everything plugged in and connected to start testing. Like I said, I'm still busy over here, but first I want to do some testing before I finish everything up. So I have the laptop, and then I got those 2 gauges connected up, everything. So yeah, let's see what it does when I turn the key. For those of you who don't know, 4 months ago when we blew the head gasket, we were actually tuning the car for the cold start, because I have always had trouble when the car is cold, it doesn't want to start. So now I pulled the file of the Ford, because that thing starts every time. So I'm going to try that on this one. So the engines work the same way, exactly the same way. It's just the crank that you have to make some changes with, the crank sensor. It's raining outside now, so it's a bit noisy. But anyway, so I got the file of the Ford loaded up onto this ECU. So if it wants to pop, it can pop. But let's see what it does. Put in the key. Switch it on, and then we'll see what this fuel gauge does. I already got some fuel in the tank, about 10 liters. Just switch the laptop on. Alright, so I'm gonna switch on the ignition, and then the ECU should come on. Okay, I hear fuel pump. The ECU. Oh, that fuel pump is putting in some work. Let's just adjust this a bit. I think that's about right. Switch it off and check for any leaks. Doesn't seem to have any fuel leaks. Alright. I even got the lights in these gauges working. So I want to check for leaks over here as well. So let's see if we get oil pressure, and yeah, I guess I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm quite nervous, but let's swing it and see. Oh, I forgot something pretty important. Almost forgot about this, so we need to change that to 60-2 M coil and make sure it's on number 11 on the trigger tooth. Switch it off. Yes. All right, let's try it again. Just gonna check for oil pressure. RPMs are working. Don't have oil pressure yet. There it comes. What the hell? What the hell? Oh my goodness. What? What? I can't believe this. The RPMs are actually working. It just worked. Okay, so we have the biggest oil leak I've ever seen. It seems like the turbo feed line, somehow I messed that up, so I'll have to get that fixed. But hey, the freaking thing started. Unfortunately, we ran out of time for this week, and I don't want to rush things. I already started rushing things, and then I just messed up. So come back next week Sunday, and then we'll finish this thing. And then, like always, thank you guys so much for watching.